Welcome to your favorite channel, the channel where reality TV's untold truths are revealed. Tonight's story is about more than love. It's about sacrifice, betrayal, and a choice that cost everything. Fans of 90 Day Fiancé thought they knew the story of Jenny Slatin and Sumit Singh, a cross-cultural romance that survived age gaps, secrets, and public judgment. But what cameras didn't show was the silent war happening behind closed doors, a conflict that forced a man to choose between the woman he loved and the family that raised him. False accusations, a mother's ultimatum, and a decision so extreme ended their life in India forever. This is the story of how Jenny and Sumit lost everything, left 90 Day Fiancé, and disappeared to chase peace far away. This is not gossip or rumor. It's the truth of love pushed to the edge. The conflict started with a single accusation. Jenny, the American wife who had worked hard to be accepted by Sumit's family, was suddenly accused of something she never did. Sumit's mother claimed Jenny had misbehaved and even assaulted her while Sumit was away. The allegation shocked everyone. For years, Jenny had faced criticism and rejection from Sumit's family. Now she was being called violent and disrespectful. Jenny was devastated. She had always tried to be kind and patient. To be accused of assaulting her mother-in-law was not only humiliating, but deeply painful. She knew the accusation was meant to turn Sumit against her. Sumit, caught in the middle, was torn. He knew Jenny would never hurt his mother. But in Indian culture, a mother's word carries great authority, and to oppose her is seen as betrayal. The accusation spread quickly, fueling gossip and deepening the feud. Jenny felt isolated, and her reputation was under attack. Sumit's pressure grew unbearable. He loved Jenny, but the accusation threatened to destroy the delicate balance he tried to keep between her and his family. The false claim was more than a lie. It was the spark that ignited the firestorm. The real devastation came when Sumit's mother delivered her ultimatum. In front of relatives and neighbors, she told her son, "If you don't divorce your wife, Jenny Slatin, you are no longer my son. I can't accept you anymore." The ultimatum was brutal. For Sumit, it felt like the ground had collapsed beneath him. His mother's words carried tradition, culture, and authority. Losing her acceptance was like losing his identity. Jenny stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had faced rejection before, but this was different. She was being cast as the villain, yet she refused to break. She had fought too hard for her love to let lies destroy it. Sumit's father remained silent, and relatives whispered, some siding with the mother, others sympathizing quietly with Jenny. The atmosphere was suffocating. For Sumit, the ultimatum was a nightmare. He loved his mother and Jenny equally. To choose one meant losing the other. The ultimatum spread beyond the family. Neighbors gossiped, community members judged, and fans of 90 Day Fiancé were stunned. Jenny tried to comfort Sumit, reminding him their love had survived many obstacles. But the ultimatum planted a seed of despair. Could their marriage survive family rejection? Could Sumit live with being disowned? The ultimatum marked the breaking point. It was no longer just a feud. It was a war between love and loyalty, tradition and freedom. Jenny and Sumit would have to make a sacrifice greater than they ever imagined. Sumit replayed every moment with Jenny, the battles they fought, the sacrifices they made, the love that crossed oceans. But now it all seemed fragile under his mother's harsh demand. Jenny watched helplessly as Sumit struggled. He felt trapped, guilty, and torn between two worlds. She reassured him, but the weight was too much. In Indian culture, family ties are sacred, and being cast out means losing identity and community. But leaving Jenny was unbearable. She was not just his wife, she was his partner, his confidant. Friends and relatives offered little comfort. Some said family must come first. Others sympathized quietly. Sumit felt isolated, and Jenny feared losing him to family pressure. The tension reached its peak. Sumit realized no choice could bring peace. The ultimatum had forced him into an impossible corner. The only way forward was to choose freedom, even if it meant leaving everything behind. The days that followed pushed Jenny and Sumit to their limits. The family feud now consumed every aspect of their lives. Every visit ended in confrontation. Relatives whispered accusations. Neighbors spread gossip. Sumit's mother repeated her demand relentlessly. divorce Jenny or lose her son. The words hung over them like a curse. Jenny felt trapped. She had crossed oceans to be with Sumit and endured years of skepticism. Yet no matter how much love she showed, she was painted as the villain. The false accusation had already harmed her reputation, and the ultimatum now threatened her marriage entirely. Sumit was crumbling under the pressure, caught between love and duty, family and freedom, identity and desire. His devotion to Jenny was unwavering, but the guilt of defying his mother weighed heavily on him. He tried to reason with her, pleading for acceptance, but every attempt ended in rejection. The emotional toll was unbearable. He was losing sleep, peace, and hope. The couple began to realize the feud was not just a temporary storm. It was a permanent barrier. No matter how hard they tried, the conflict would never end. Jenny's presence would always be resented, and Sumit's loyalty would always be questioned. The family's demands had become cruel, leaving them with only one way forward. Escape point one evening. After another heated confrontation, Jenny and Sumit sat together in silence. The weight of the feud pressed down on them. But in that silence, clarity came. They could no longer live like this. The constant turmoil, accusations, and ultimatums were destroying them. Sumit finally spoke, his voice heavy but firm. "We have to leave. If we stay, we'll never have peace." Jenny nodded, tears in her eyes, knowing he was right. Their breaking point had arrived. Their love had survived countless obstacles, but the feud made one thing clear. To protect their marriage, they had to sacrifice everything else. They prepared to make the hardest decision of their lives, leaving India forever. After weeks of conflict, false accusations, and Sumit's mother's ultimatum, Jenny and Sumit knew they could no longer endure the chaos. Their love had survived many storms, but peace would never exist if they stayed. One evening, they sat together in their living room. The silence was heavy with unspoken pain. The walls that had once echoed with laughter now felt suffocating, weighed down by years of rejection and hostility. Jenny looked at Sumit, her eyes full of sorrow and determination. "We can't live like this anymore," she whispered. Sumit nodded, pale but resolute. He had tried everything, pleading with his mother, reasoning with relatives, enduring humiliation. Nothing had worked. The ultimatum made it clear. His family would never accept Jenny, and their marriage would always be under attack. They began to discuss the unthinkable, leaving India. It was not a decision made lightly. India was Sumit's homeland, where his memories and traditions lived. For Jenny, it was the country she had embraced for love, sacrificing comfort to build a life with him. Yet staying meant endless turmoil. Starting fresh in another country brought a glimmer of hope. Australia became their destination, a land far from the feud where they could live freely without judgment. It was a chance to rebuild, to redefine their lives, and finally live as husband and wife without family interference. The decision was painful but liberating. Jenny and Sumit realized love sometimes demands sacrifice, not of each other, but of ties that threaten to destroy it. By leaving India, they chose freedom, peace, and the chance to write their own story. That night, they made a pact. They would sell everything, their house, possessions, and ties to the past, and begin anew. The decision was final. The feud had taken enough from them. It was time to reclaim their lives. To leave India, they had to sever every tie, emotionally and financially. The house they had built, the possessions they collected, even small comforts carrying memories, all had to go. They began quietly, holding discreet meetings and negotiations. Sumit contacted real estate agents, explaining the property needed a quick but fair sale. The house, once a symbol of their love, now became the key to freedom. Potential buyers toured it unaware of the emotional weight inside. For Jenny, watching strangers walk through the rooms was heartbreaking. Every corner held memories, laughter, arguments, reconciliations, and dreams. Yet she knew they had to leave it behind. The house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a reminder of their battles. After weeks of negotiation, the property sold for $1.2 million, more than they expected. It gave them hope for the future. They then began liquidating their remaining possessions, furniture, vehicles, personal items. Some were sold, others donated. Nothing was kept. They wanted a clean slate, free from the shadows of the past. The sale marked a turning point. For the first time, they felt liberation. The feud, accusations, and ultimatum had pushed them to this moment. Selling everything reclaimed their lives. Yet the decision came with pain. Jenny cried as she packed belongings, leaving behind not just a house, but a chapter of her life. Sumit, though resolute, felt the weight of abandoning his homeland. But both knew the sacrifice was necessary. With money secured and possessions gone, they prepared for the next step. Australia, a new country, a new beginning, and the chance to live without judgment awaited them. The sale was more than a financial transaction. It symbolized the end of their life in India. As they prepared to leave, the emotional farewell loomed. For Sumit, it was the land of his childhood, full of streets carrying laughter, struggle, and tradition. For Jenny, it was the country she embraced for love, enduring rejection but holding hope. Now they stood at the edge of departure, knowing they would never return the same. The days before the flight were filled with quiet reflection. Jenny walked through the empty house one last time, touching walls that had witnessed their battles and triumphs. "This was our home, but it's time to let go," she whispered. Sumit's farewell was heavier. He visited familiar places, the stalls where he spent afternoons, the temple where he prayed for strength, the streets of his youth. Each goodbye felt like a cut, severing ties to a life he had cherished. Yet the family conflict made it clear. India was no longer a safe haven. Their departure was not celebrated. Sumit's mother refused to see them off, her ultimatum still hanging. Relatives kept their distance. Only a few close friends came, offering quiet words of support. "You deserve peace," one friend told Jenny. "Maybe you'll find it far away." At the airport, emotions ran high. Jenny held Sumit's hand tightly, tears brimming in her eyes. The weight of leaving an entire life behind pressed down on them. The moment they stepped into the airport, the reality of leaving India fully hit them. The bustling crowds, the bright announcements over the speakers, even the smell of food and travel, it all felt surreal. Every step toward the gate felt like leaving a lifetime behind. Jenny's hand squeezed Sumit's tightly. They didn't speak much. Words felt too heavy. As they walked, memories flashed in their minds, both painful and sweet. Sumit remembered running through the streets of his childhood, laughter echoing with friends, festivals filled with color, prayers whispered in the temple. Every corner of India carried meaning for him. For Jenny, the memories were layered differently. Her own sacrifices, the struggles to adapt, the small victories in winning even a fragment of acceptance from Sumit's family. She thought of quiet nights cooking in their kitchen, moments of laughter with Sumit, whispered dreams for the future. All of it would now exist only in memory. At the check-in counter, Sumit handed over their luggage. Each suitcase represented more than clothes or personal items. It carried the remnants of their old life, the tangible pieces of a home they had built together. Jenny watched as the attendants rolled the luggage away, and a lump formed in her throat. She wanted to grab every suitcase and take it back inside, but she didn't. She had promised herself they were leaving everything behind. Freedom demanded sacrifice. As they approached the gate, they saw other travelers hurrying past, families reuniting, friends saying goodbye. None of it felt real to them. To everyone else, it was routine. To Jenny and Sumit, it was a final threshold, one they could never step back from. Their flight was announced, and they moved quickly to board, trying to ignore the tears threatening to fall. Once seated on the plane, Jenny rested her head on Sumit's shoulder. The hum of the engines and the chatter of fellow passengers felt distant, almost unreal. For the first time in months, they were alone together, free from ultimatums, gossip, and relentless pressure. Sumit held her hand, their fingers entwined tightly. No words were needed. The silence itself carried understanding. They were finally choosing each other over everything else. Hours passed as the plane soared above the clouds. Jenny stared out the window, watching the vast expanse of India disappear beneath them. Cities, rivers, and mountains, everything that had once been familiar and comforting, was now part of their past. A wave of sadness washed over her, but it was mingled with relief. The feud, the accusations, the endless tension, they were leaving it all behind. Sumit noticed her trembling slightly and wrapped his arm around her. "We're going to be okay," he whispered. "We'll make a home wherever we go as long as we're together." Landing in Australia felt like stepping into another world. The airport was different, quieter in some ways, cleaner, unfamiliar. Every announcement and sign reminded them they were far from home, yet safe. They claimed their luggage and stepped out into the fresh air, taking in the foreign landscape. For a moment, neither spoke, they simply breathed. They had crossed continents, leaving everything familiar behind. Their hearts were heavy with loss, but also filled with hope. The first days in Australia were a mixture of awe, adjustment, and exhaustion. Renting a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, they unpacked only the essentials. Their previous life, the furniture, the decorations, even the sentimental items, was gone. Now, every object in their apartment represented a choice, a fresh start, and freedom. Jenny and Sumit spent hours talking, planning, dreaming. They decided they would rebuild slowly, without the pressure of anyone else's expectations. Outside, the streets were different, the culture unfamiliar. Jenny marveled at the greenery, the wide roads, and the sense of calm. Sumit, too, felt a mix of excitement and melancholy. He knew it would take time to heal from the years of tension and the emotional scars left by his family. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of control over his life. They were free to define their own happiness. Despite the relief of leaving, the emotional weight of the past still lingered. Jenny often found herself awake at night, thinking of the life they left behind, the empty house, the streets of Sumit's childhood, the family who had rejected them. She would sometimes wake Sumit, tearful, feeling the loss of the home they had built. Sumit held her, whispering that what mattered most was the life they had together now, not the one they had lost. Slowly, those nights became less frequent as the new life took hold. They also faced practical challenges. Starting over in a new country meant navigating a new culture, a new job market, and new systems for daily life. Sumit spent hours learning about employment opportunities and visa requirements, while Jenny looked for ways to connect with local communities. They leaned on each other, their partnership stronger than ever, because it was forged under pressure and through sacrifice. Every small success, opening a bank account, finding a grocery store, setting up their internet, felt monumental. In this new chapter, their love deepened. Without interference from family or neighbors, they could finally communicate openly and make decisions together without fear or judgment. They laughed more freely, shared quiet evenings, and began to explore the beauty around them. The pain of leaving India remained, but it was now balanced with the joy of freedom. They discovered parks, beaches, and cafes. They met neighbors and made new friends, cautious but hopeful, slowly building a sense of belonging. Jenny and Sumit also began to reflect on the journey that brought them here. They remembered the struggles they faced, cultural barriers, age differences, gossip, false accusations, and ultimatums. They acknowledged the pain, but also the growth. Each challenge had prepared them for this moment, a life together built on mutual trust and resilience, independent of anyone else's approval. Months passed, and the emptiness of their first weeks gave way to stability. They found jobs that allowed them to live comfortably, joined social groups, and began creating routines that brought joy instead of stress. The past, once overwhelming, now felt distant. Occasionally, they thought of Sumit's family, not with anger but with acceptance. Some wounds might never fully heal, but they were no longer controlling their lives. On quiet evenings, Jenny and Sumit would sit together, watching the sunset from their balcony, reflecting on the sacrifices that brought them here. "We gave up everything," Jenny said softly, "but we gained each other." Sumit nodded, squeezing her hand. "And this time, nothing can take that away from us." Their story became one of resilience, love, and freedom. The feud that once defined them no longer had power over their happiness. They realized that sometimes protecting love requires letting go, not of each other, but of the past that threatens to destroy it. Australia became their sanctuary, a place to rebuild and dream without fear. Looking back, Jenny and Sumit knew the journey was painful and the losses were real, but the choice to leave was the only path to peace. They had survived betrayal, accusations, and ultimatums. They had sold everything, said goodbye to everything familiar, and stepped into a future uncertain but full of promise. Their love, tested to the edge, had endured. And as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, hand in hand, they felt the quiet certainty of a life finally their own. Free from judgment, free from conflict, free to love without boundaries, they embraced the new chapter ahead.